Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Thought Leadership webinars. We have Dr. Brett Kawada here today, who is an associate professor of accounting with the Woodbury University School of Business. Brett's research interests include auditing, financial reporting, and accounting education issues. Dr. Kawada's work has been published in numerous journals, such as the Journal of Accounting and Public Policy, Managerial Auditing Journal, Journal of Accounting Education, and Review of Accounting and Finance, among others. Prior to joining the School of Business at Woodbury University, Dr. Kawada taught auditing, financial accounting, and managerial accounting courses at San Diego State University and the University of Texas at El Paso. A native of Hawaii, he spent 8 years as a CPA and auditor with the Honolulu office of KPMG LLP before he decided to pursue a career in academia where he is right now. And so now, without further ado, over to Dr. Brett Kawada.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome everybody. Like I mentioned, I think we're gonna have some guests from Redlands potentially, but I actually had like sort of talks with all my guest speakers except Ash Golzio. I want to say hi to Ash. Thank you for being here. So good to see you. It's been a few years, right? So anyway, do I share my screen? I can, right? I have the capabilities as I believe so, right? Can you guys see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna do a real brief intro of what we're gonna talk about here today. So, when I get asked to do these, I always think like, well, who wants to listen to me drone on about something super technical? And I thought it might be more useful from a student perspective. So what I do, this idea I came up with last year was, why don't I do a quick talk on career paths in accounting degree with your accounting degree, like what you can do when you major in it. Because I sometimes still feel in this day and age that there's a misconception that you're just going to be crunching on a computer and a calculator in some windowless office or cubicle, whatever, for your entire life. And it's not really like that. It's a lot more dynamic. And for those that were here last year, I hope you saw that a little bit because, I had people that are still in public accounting, but that are now doing other things like, work financial analyst at a hedge fund in San Francisco or, VP of finance for a sports team and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm gonna go through this real quick. So yeah, Jonah kind of introduced me. You guys kind of know who I am at this point. This is a little bit about me. I'm from Hawaii, so I did my undergrad and master's at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. I was with the Honolulu office of KPMG in auditing for 8 years before and this is always on my mind, and go back to school and pursue a PhD in accountancy and a career in academia. So I did go to the University of Missouri, and of course, everyone thought I was completely insane. They're like, "You're moving from Honolulu to Columbia. What are you doing, man? Or what are you doing with your life?" And admittedly, I thought that sometimes during the winters and the heavy workloads in a PhD program. But anyway, all worked out. I'm very happy with my choices. And my first job out of Missouri was at San Diego State, where I was for 7 years, and then I went actually back for a year during COVID. But I had a couple visiting prof positions, first at UTEP, Texas, El Paso, and then at back for a year at SCSU before I started at Woodbury, which is now 2 years ago, roughly. I'm in my third year. I've also contract taught at UCSD, University of California at San Diego, in their not in their business school actually, but in their school of policy. They needed some accounting work. So that's a brief intro about me. And so I talk about accounting for the students that are here. I think there's this misconception. You get this definition thrown out a lot, the language of business. I don't really like that definition because twofold. I feel like you could be really good at accounting, but not necessarily a great business person. And I can also feel like you can be a great business person and have nothing to do with accounting. And why should I? Because I make more than enough money, right? So whatever's. So anyway, to me, it's a much more broader definition. I call it like a series of activities, including like identifying that there's a situation here or a trend, something, a arrangement, deal, whatever that I might need to account for, right? If that is the case, what is this? Like analyzing the situation, like what is the nature of this transaction in general? What's being affected, how is it affecting each party of the transaction, what kind of, let's say, accounts or elements, et cetera, are being affected, increasing or decreasing, et cetera. Then I can go into like actually classifying where these things should go in an accounting sense, and which will ultimately flow to their financial statements. Measuring these things, you got to actually quantify it in whatever the native currency is. In America, of course, it's the dollar, right? So you have to be able to quantify it and measure it, and then actually formally recording it, to like a journal ledger or a general ledger, and then ultimately flowing to the financial statements where you will communicate that to interested users that need that. So for example, for financial statements, it can be potential investors that might want to invest in that company's stock. Let's say for public companies, it can be financial institutions that decide whether or not and maybe the terms of how they want to lend you debt capital, stuff like that. Okay. So one thing about accounting, as opposed to a lot of other kinds of majors, is that to me, it's a very streamlined process, especially if you're going the public accounting route, which are the CPA firms. You're going to go to school. In all likelihood, you may get involved in some kind of accounting student organization. Pretty much every school has events called Meet the Firms of some kind, where it's usually like in the early fall. That's when the beginning of the recruiting process kind of gets going. And at your respective school, it can be in person or virtual, but you can meet individuals working for the various firms, maybe working for other kinds of companies besides CPA firms. And sometimes there's also like nonprofits and governmental agencies as well. And then I'll leave this up to the people that are going to guest speak. But this wasn't a thing when I was in school, at least the leadership programs were. I'm not sure if that's still a thing or not post-COVID, but they're kind of like looking into students sometimes as early as like sophomore. I've heard even like freshman year, they identify people maybe, and they kind of get you under their wing. And the leadership programs are a lot more fun in nature, I want to say, not overly technical and stuff, but that's kind of even like the pre-internship, so to say. And then that'll eventually lead to an internship. And of course, if you do it your internship, it can potentially lead to a full-time offer. So when I say streamlined process, it's like much before you even graduate. It's not like I graduate now, what? It's like I'm about to graduate and I've had this job already lined up for like a year. So as far as today's guests go, I have some individuals still working for a CPA firm or in public accounting, and then also some that have left public accounting. And I tried to find connection or people I know that were in prominent companies, especially for prospective and current accounting students. That these companies are. Oh, I know exactly what this. I might even use them in all likelihood. So I had some questions for today's guests. They're not going to necessarily follow them to a T. I just said this is just some guidelines, but feel free to say what you want. But I mostly want to talk about their path to where they are today, as from their education background and then to graduating and starting work, etc. And then how you know me, it's mostly from class, of course. And then I think there's one that's not class. It was just purely the student organizations. And then I think the last part is advice you'd give to a prospective or even current accounting student. You can be general in nature, or it can be much more contemporary and technological in nature as far as what their knowledge is of AI, data analytics, et cetera, going into the profession. That's going to affect everybody, basically. But I mean, if you recall from last year, even with that kind of like prompt, I think a lot of the guest speakers said, well, just be a good writer and communicator and know your stuff and have a positive attitude. I think that still and timelessly will go a long way in whatever you decide to do with your life and career. So with that, that's all I have as far as my intro. So I think I had a particular order in mind. So I'm going to start with Holly. And the reason I'm starting with Holly is Holly now lives on the East Coast and she has a toddler. So she's 3 hours ahead of us. And it might be dinner, bath time. I don't even know. So Holly, I think I saw her there. Feel free to start when you're ready.
Hi. She actually is in between. I'll finish before bath time. So thank you for letting me go first. My name is Holly Bancroft. I am a tax manager at PwC. I'm actually been with PwC for like a month now. When I was first out of school, I went with Deloitte, and then moved from San Diego to Charlotte and decided that I didn't really care for the vibe of the Deloitte Charlotte office and made the transition to PwC because don't let anybody fool you. The work is basically all the same. It really matters who you work with. That's really where it's at, especially when you spend a lot of your life with those people. Let's see. I guess I said tax manager, right? So I do renewable energy specifics. It's pretty exciting stuff to do. I remember sitting in college and thinking about doing tax, and I thought, well, I'm gonna get some knowledge here, get my CPA, and I'm gonna go make my own shop. And it was actually Professor Gill, Kawada, that convinced me to go to public accounting and go Big Four route first. So I was listening actually to that about what it's like to go into public, and I was non-traditional. I went to community college first, and then I transferred to San Diego State, got my bachelor's degree there, and then did my MBA there also. So I did the BMAC program, so the 4+1. So essentially I got to get my master's for half the price and half the time, which was fantastic for me. And I actually started recruiting during my master's. I had no intention of going into public my whole career my whole college career until the very end. And luckily, the firms pay attention to those things. I think they're aware that they miss out on talent. If you don't I think what you're talking about, like those leadership programs, like a discovery intern, which is like a freshman, and they intern for like 4 years. And I remember the pure panic of knowing that most of the master's people in my classes had already accepted offers, and I hadn't even considered where did I want to work. So luckily, a lot of people had advice for me, and I went to that Meet the Firms, and I reached out to recruiters and kind of just led with my best foot forward, and they gave me an offer. And so that worked out pretty well. I have a CPA in California and in North Carolina now that I live out in that area. I went to San Diego State. I had Kawada for audit, which is not why I'm not an auditor. I just wasn't really a huge fan of the audit.
Academia has thick skin. Don't worry, I'm not offended at all. Yeah.
I'd have to say that it was really kind of just being open to opportunities and being willing to take the advice of people who took an interest in me. I had a couple professors that were willing to share advice if I asked questions. That's kind of how I got here today, is just trying to remain open-minded and not being so hung up on what the end game is. Because for me, the reason that I got into accounting was because it's kind of a recession-proof job. Or getting a career in accounting, you're usually not laid off maybe finance people or any of those things. But not that there's anything wrong with those careers, it just wasn't for me. And I got into tax because I did VITA, which is a volunteer income tax class at San Diego State, and I realized that I really enjoyed helping people with taxes, because it was a language that I could kind of understand, and not most people can. I feel like reading tax law is takes a special kind of person that likes pain to do that, I think. And that was me. I liked it. It made sense to me. And yeah, I just kept talking to people. And I think that's probably one of the most important. And I know you hear it a lot and wonder if you even, I wondered if I did it right, was networking. The people that are really important. Sometimes even if you don't really like them, you really never know what position that they're going to take later. And I actually, funny thing is, when I was ready to leave Deloitte, I had a recruiter reach out to me just at the right time. And I interviewed at a private equity company, and I really liked them, but I wasn't ready to give up on public accounting yet. And I later obviously took this job at PwC, and my office actually does their tax returns of that private equity company. So they've requested that I specifically work on their engagement, which is kind of flattering, I guess, so you really never know how the world is just really small, and you really never know, even if now, if you guys all want to send me a request on LinkedIn, I'll happily accept it, because you never know how that may come back for you later. I like that you said communication, because I feel like that is important no matter what career path you take. Communicate, even if you feel like you're over communicating, working on a team, being able to say where things are, and not just being where people are trying to follow up with you all the time for status or what is this or what is that. It really helps you appear to be a team player, and I don't know, if you guys have ever worked with anybody, but I'm not really a big fan of working with people who are not team players. It makes it much more difficult to, you guys have done group projects, right? You guys all know the person on your group project who doesn't do anything. Don't be that person. That applies to your real life. That is literally gearing you up to working in the field, right? In anywhere, at any job, in any career, really, unless you're in Antarctica being a scientist or something. I don't know who works by themselves anymore, but Yeah, I think just like being able to like network means that you don't have to like know everything. And I don't think anybody expects you to know everything. Um, I think for me, the biggest tool that's helped me get this far is being able to know who to ask. So the more people I know, like I make a lot of friends in like people who do like state and local tax stuff because I know nothing about that. And I get questions that come up about that. And like, I'm not going to read 75 state forms because they change their rules every year. And so if I know a state and local person, I can ask that question without, and still appear like I know what I'm talking about to my clients. So really it's like who you know. So like just be cordial to the people that you meet because you really just don't know how that's going to come back to you. You really don't. So I think that's all I have.
Yeah.
Was that enough time?
Oh yeah, that's great.
Okay. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? I know a lot of our guest speakers have a lot of their commitments, so I don't want to keep them too long in case they have to leave. So, do anybody have any questions for Holly regarding tax? That's here. All right. If not, feel free to follow up. Like she said, you can do it through me if you need to. And you got to go. I understand. We all understand
Yes.
completely. Yeah.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Good luck, guys.
All right.
Bye.
So Holly was also my GA, even though she didn't like audit after she finished the class after in a subsequent year. So anyway, I think Jenny has a time constraint. So I thought maybe Jenny could speak real quick. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, hard to follow up that one with Holly. Brad, you set me up for
yeah.
failure here. Just kidding. But hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Fan. I work at KPMG in the advisory service line. I graduated from SDSU, I think in 2021, and got my bachelor's and master's there, where I had the pleasure of having Professor Kawada actually as my professor for audit. And I mean, I think that my degree, going back to kind of what Kawada said earlier about how schools really set you up for success, especially when it comes to the accounting profession. I think my degree, one, helped me find a job right out of college. It helped me also be able to kind of better understand what these different, C-suite level people at different companies actually care about. And so that's kind of, I think, the difference between advisory versus like external audit versus like tax, where you're kind of doing things, external audit, you're doing things, you're auditing the client, right? Versus in advisory, you're working alongside the client or on behalf of the client. And so it's a different perspective. And then let me see, the last one was advice. My advice, I think, would be to take ownership of your career and yourself, whether that means you being in school and taking the opportunity to reach out to people, go to those different meet the firm events, the networking events, and then also when you're in the actual workforce, taking ownership as far as making sure that you understand what it is that you're actually doing, kind of getting some kind of idea of the bigger picture. And then I think from there, you're kind of set up to succeed.
Cool. And then what specifically do you do it with in the advisory area, Jenny?
So I do internal audit and enterprise risk. So it's a lot of business process reviews where you're kind of looking at all the different areas throughout a company. You're not just looking at one area that relates to financial statements. Like you're looking at the whole shebang, how it operates, and you're acting as the third line of defense for the client.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And feel free to reach out to me too.
I'm sorry?
I said, feel free to reach out to me too if you have any questions.
Yeah, and I think this goes for everyone, all our guest speakers. Feel free, if you can't find them particularly, and you have questions specifically for them, you can use me as the liaison and the medium. Does anybody have any questions for Jenny? No? Okay. So as a question, any skill set you think students should have? I guess like particular skill sets, and whether it be technical or otherwise.
I mean, honestly, not the technical, because I think that'll come with time. But I will say the number one piece of feedback that I've just heard ever since I think COVID happened was being able to speak and communicate well to people. I know it can be nerve-wracking and everything, but just realizing that, like, no one expects you to know everything. And so being able to just show up, show your face, and try, I think is really all that they're looking for, especially when you first start.
So I don't know if you can see the questions. One says, another question popped up and said, what percentage of your workday is spent with others versus working alone?
Honestly, like 50-50.
Yeah.
It kind of depends on your role too, right? And like your project team setup. Every team's going to be slightly different, but when you're brand new starting, I'd say it's definitely 50-50 because you'll have someone there to kind of support you. And then when it comes down to just, heads down time, getting tasks done, that's kind of when you'll be alone and doing a more solo job.
Yeah, and I can add to that to say, I'm sadly a lot older than all our guests, but like it's way different than when I sound like grandpa now, when I was working in public accounting, right? But
You
anyway, so
aged yourself.
but when I was working in public accounting, yeah, it was definitely in person. We didn't have all this stuff, and I definitely think that over time with technological advances, that leads to greater efficiency, where you don't got to travel all over the place to do stuff and this and that. And I think that was definitely affected or advanced or whatever you want to call it by COVID, where you couldn't actually be there physically. And now I think we were talking about this the other day, right? That a lot of your client provided evidential matter or whatever you need from them is in the cloud. Was that with you or someone else? I don't remember, but like you don't have to like go to their office and get all the stuff and this and that, right? You don't have to be on their network even. It's all out there for you. You can probably do it from your home or whatever. So, okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we'll just go to Ash because Ash is in the same line of services as well as the same firm, I believe, right, Ash?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Jenny and I are actually very close friends outside of the firm too. We both got our undergrad in accounting at SDSU and then also both did the BMAC. So did Masters in Accounting Information Systems at SDSU. So that's that 4+1 program that Holly was referring to earlier. So yeah, we both started at KPMG on actually the same day after school, like completely in the same service line, but on different teams and everything. So we don't actually like work together on a day-to-day basis, but it's been nice to have my best friend at work with me because I can like Teams ping her questions that I have and vice versa. I'm a senior in the tech risk management and cybersecurity service line. So it falls under, as Jenny said, the advisory service line, but the actual practice is cybersecurity and tech risk management. So my role is a little bit different from Jenny's in that she really focuses more on the business process side of things. My focus is really on the data and the systems that are involved in those business processes. The way that I really like to explain it, because I know all this stuff, like I think audit language, I also had Kawada for audit, and I think audit language can be super confusing and so high level before you actually get into doing it.
Sorry
So the way that
that.
not just as a view, but like just when I started day one at KPMG, like the person who was teaching me some stuff was like, yeah, I don't really know what this is, but, or, like, let's ask our manager. And there's a lot of people who don't understand the technical aspects of things until you like really get your hands into doing it. So don't be afraid if right now what you're learning like doesn't totally connect. It will start to connect as you get further along. But the way that I like to describe it to people is essentially how my role relates to tech and accounting at the same time is for really large companies. So my main client is one of the big tech companies. So all of the data that has to flow through their systems and to get to their financial statements needs to have assurance over it, right? And so that's the way that my role fits into the process is I will be brought in as like the IT specialist that works with Jenny's team on the business side so that we can ensure that we have coverage over, or the company has coverage over all of the data flowing through the systems that will eventually land in the financial statements. So it can get quite technical, but I also, like Jenny would say, my advice for you is not necessarily to focus on the technical, but more actually on kind of the interpersonal relationships. That seems to be a focus that I've heard a lot from managers plus in the firm right now is a lot of associates come in, and because everything's been learning in like COVID environment, it's definitely noticeable that people aren't as used to interacting in person anymore. And as we move forward, that's going to be something that you have to do at least a couple days a week in person. So even if you're I'm mostly remote. I probably go in and see my team once a month. I travel about once a month, but into our actual KPMG office, I probably do like once a month. And so I'm probably like the most remote that you'll find. And I'll still tell you that I really stress just working on your interpersonal skills and working on getting comfortable interacting with people. But also caveat to that, I think when you're first interviewing for roles, like big four, right? Everyone kind of seems a little bit intimidating because they're all like in the position that you want to get into. I think it's like super important to remember that everyone that you're talking to is a person. So the director that's interviewing you is someone's dad and someone's grandpa and someone's uncle or mom or whatever. And so like, I think it's really important in this time while we're trying to find new ways to connect to people to just remember that people are people. And you can get super far by actually taking the time to connect to people like outside of just the technical stuff, but don't remove like your professionalism layer, right? I find that that's something that I've seen some associates struggling with as they've come in, is like kind of trying to get the balance between being casual and sort of working like with some big tech clients, and so it feels a little bit more casual, but just understanding like you want to keep and maintain that boundary of professionalism still. And you can do that and still like express yourself and express your personality and connect to people above you and next to you. And that makes a really big difference, I think, in how far you get, because that's a really crucial aspect to the networking that Kawada was talking about.
Cool. Yeah, I just want to add on to that a little bit, like what Ash was saying about I think the time during COVID, early on, especially during the pandemic, where everyone was so distanced, and I think some of the interpersonal stuff got kind of lost in the shuffle or was lacking, and I struggle with that a little bit. Not me personally, like, but within my classes, I've noticed that a lot of students just call me professor, and like I think you should call me by name, and I'm not trying to make it like I'm a general or whatever. It's not the military or whatever, but like at the same time, it's like I always said when you go to like a firm, like when I started working at KPMG in Hawaii, there were like partners that are like my dad's age, and I immediately started calling them by their first name. That's the culture, and that's what everybody does. And I think it's and I'm not saying you have to show this to me necessarily as an instructor, but like it's a sign of respect, and you remember them, and that's how you build from there. So I definitely concur with that completely.
Yeah. I think just if I could add on one other thing, like piece of advice that I'd like to share is just I share with the associates that I work with sort of like what I view as the pieces. This is probably the most helpful conversation that I have with any teammates that I'm working with when I'm and doing any sort of like training type of exercises, is how I define a high performer, because I think high performers are defined differently depending on who you're working with. But I'll say generally myself and all the teams that I work with, you define a high performer not as someone who has the like most expert level skill in the technical skill set that you're looking at, or is not the smartest in the room, but it's the person usually who can be professional, be on time, make sure that they're taking notes, have their camera on and interact in a way that kind of still makes it feel personal even though you're remotely interacting. But also things like not asking the same questions twice, because you're then showing that you're not listening when someone's always willing to take time out of their day to answer questions or to help you with anything, but it only gets frustrating when you have to do it multiple times with the same person because they weren't paying attention the first time, right? So like I think those are marks of a high performer: taking initiative, being on time, and those things I think are actually much more memorable to whoever you work with, and whoever you're interviewing with or learning from, than whether or not you were like super master in whatever technical skill set.
Oh, that brings back a bad memory for me, because recently I was teaching. I don't know if the accountants would know what this is for sure. Maybe bond amortization. Remember that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, I was teaching that, and I had a student, can we meet after class? I want to go over something related to that. I was like, okay. And so we meet, and this is completely on my own time. And like, that thing you did in class, can you do it again? And I'm like, oh my God, that was like 45 minutes, man. Like, like I said, you should probably don't do this at work in real life, because you're gonna upset some people. I'm chill, but
Totally.
yeah.
I'm chill, but I'm very like transparent and very kind of direct. So I've actually like told the associates that I work with, when they ask me something I've already spent an hour of time, because the thing once you actually get into work, like that's a chargeable hour that I've lost to teaching something. So it's not like cutthroat, but it's just like being respectful of people's time, and if they spend time teaching you something, take the time to engage. And
so we had a couple questions. I don't know if you can see it, Ash. How much training, including hands-on training, shadowing, does the company give you to do your job compared to what you learned in your school program?
Yeah, so I interned for KPMG, but I interned in like the very first summer of COVID. So my internship wasn't even like, I talk with my directors, don't tell people that I interned, because then they expect me to know something from that. And really all I was doing was just watching like people and culture videos. So I didn't really get any like hands-on experience with any clients before I got into my role now. So I would say that compared to your school program, like most of what you're going to learn if you go Big Four and go into that path is going to be on the job learning. And I won't lie to you, it hits pretty quickly. You kind of just learn as you go, but also like everyone around you is very aware of the fact that that's how it is. And they're very also transparent at like, you know, how long it took them to learn certain things. So I would say most of your training is really going to be, it's hands-on, but it's a good question, because like another thing that I would mark as a high performer quality is if you reach a problem or if you reach something that you don't know how to do, what I always ask the people that I'm working with is apply the 15-minute rule and try it out for 15 minutes on your own. I don't want you spending more than 15 minutes on it, because I don't want you wasting time if it's something that I can easily help you with. But I also want you to try to critically think through a problem and how you might solve it, so that you can come to the training session that we have and come to it with like an approach that you think might be the right way to go, or some answers that you think might be in the direction of where you want to go. So a lot of it is training that's like that. Give it a try. There's you like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to be like, good try, but no, this is the way we're going to go instead. And most of it's really like day-to-day hands-on.
Yeah.
As you learn to work.
I would say a couple of things. When you start public accounting, it's inherent and natural to be nervous and oh my God, whatever. But also they hired you for a reason in all likelihood, and you'll be very shocked and surprised in yourself at how much of a sponge you can be, especially early on, because it's just a tsunami of information coming at you. But it's like, you know, you'll be surprised 2 months later. Oh yeah, I know that down the road, right? And then secondly, as far as your problem solving, I agree with that. And one thing I used to do, I can speak for myself, is that especially when I was a senior and I was like doing the audit and like there's some issue that's super great. I'm like, how I would problem solve is I'd make a time to meet with my partner. And then when I got to that actual meeting, because their time is super valuable, here's the way I see it. These are our alternatives, and you tell me if one of these alternatives are not feasible at all. But I mean, in the end, for the partners and the managers, they're the ones that are going to sign off on this thing. So this is kind of like your decision, but I'm trying to make your decision a lot easier and efficient, where it's like, here's all the options. That way I see it. If I'm missing something, please. But if not, tell me what you want me to do and let's do it. And done.
Yeah, 100%. And 90% of the time they go, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Option A, like that's the way we want to go. And so you've just made that so much easier. So I would say that's a good piece of advice.
Last question, I think, is another, what do you say is an interview question that students should be prepared for? Almost like guaranteed. That I interviewed a long time ago, right? So yeah.
I mean, even my interview feels like mine was 2020. So even mine feels like a long time ago now, but let's see, interview question. I would say just be prepared to speak to how you approach challenges. So kind of like what we just talked through, right? Because the same way that Holly was talking about working with your team once you actually get into work is a lot like working with a group project. And you can always tell the people who were like the slackers on the group project versus the people who carried most of the weight. And the people who were the slackers are often those that don't get asked to be on like the cool projects or projects that you want to be on. So there's still similar challenges that you're going to face when you get to the job that you already currently face, things like how you communicate and work through a problem with a team member or like a group member. Or if you guys, like I work through college, so I'm sure some of you guys also have some jobs that you're working on right now. So just be prepared to speak to how you react and how you approach a problem when you're faced with it, whatever that problem is. The skill set probably will translate over to whatever job you go into.
Yeah. That didn't change from when I interviewed way long time ago, the situational types, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Ash? All right. If not, thanks, Ash. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Yeah. If you have to bounce, feel free. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So I think we have one more person in public accounting. So I think George is here, right? George?
That's right.
Hey.
How's everyone doing? I'm a audit senior manager at Moss Adams in the San Diego office. Moss Adams is a regional firm, primarily in the West Coast, but we are expanding, more central and eventually, I think, the East. But I am in the apparel and retail industry, so it's a very cool space. Just given the fact that I get to, see the products that I would me or others would buy, and get to see how much they pay for to pay for these items that
And
we're
then never buy it
paying.
again.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you realize how much more you're paying.
Like what?
But it's a very cool space because when it comes to inventory observations and stuff like that, it's actually something cool to see rather than other industries such as software or anything where I don't necessarily understand exactly what they do. But I went to San Diego State. Professor Kawada was my audit professor, so I think that's probably why I ended up picking that route. And I do have my CPA in California. And as Professor Kawada mentioned, the streamlined process for accounting I think is very helpful because although a little stressful, given how soon you have to be prepared for all these steps, it did help me get a job right after school. So I think I want to say I was in school when the leadership program started. So I did the leadership program. Eventually got an internship off of that, and then from there got a full-time offer. So I basically went through the whole process, and it was awesome to be a senior knowing that I already had a job. Well, it was kind of messed up, but my colleagues were stressing senior year. I was just hanging out.
Yeah.
But I know we've talked a lot about some advice that we give. I think one thing that I believe is very helpful, especially seeing some of the newer staff that are coming in from college, is Excel, specifically in audit. I want to say the staff and I we're in Excel about 70 to 80, 90% of the time on the job. And so as everyone has mentioned, it's a huge learning curve, public accounting. And so if you can come in prepared, I'm not saying you got to be an expert at Excel, but even knowing some of the basic functions, some pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, it's going to be very beneficial because that's one less thing to worry about when you're already trying to learn all of these other, concepts and all that stuff. And so I asked some of my new staff, and they always mention that Instagram, TikTok, there's people out there making money. Just showing you how to use Excel. So if you're going to be scrolling, I suggest you add that at least into your timeline there, just so you can actually you can learn something while you're just chilling. But outside of that, I think as everyone mentioned, willingness to learn I think is a key skill. When I have new staff, if they're willing to learn, it makes me a little bit more excited to teach because there are people who come in, it's just a job for them and they don't really put in that effort to learn these things. And it honestly, it leads to a lot of low performers just because, they're not putting in that time. They're not eager to learn. And when you're not eager to learn something, I believe you're not going to really retain it as easy as if, you're actually out there proactively trying to take something away from what they're teaching you. And I think I think those two are like really key, especially for some students coming in.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, so I try to harp on those things a little bit as well, as far as being interested in stuff and doing what you want to do. It's going to come through in your work, I feel like, right?
Exactly.
Cool. Does anybody have any? Is that it, George? Anything else to say? I'm not sure. Yeah,
that's it.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for George? Okay. If not, we'll move on. George has a newborn. He told me earlier this week. So if you got stuff to do, we all completely understand, right? Yeah. Congrats on that again.
Thank you.
So that was all the public accounting speakers I had, and I'm not sure they can speak on this better than I can, of course, but still, I think turnover. I mean, when I was working, turnover was a huge thing. I think it still kind of is, retention of the firms that want to retain their employees because they invest so much in you. But it's inevitable that there's turnover and people leave after a few years or whatnot. So we have some people that I put in the life after public accounting category, and The first is here, Andy Ying. So Andy is the only speaker here today that was never in my class, but he was in the student org that I became faculty advisor of, and we always just got along really well. So I'll let him take it away and discuss what he wants to discuss. So go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'm Andy Ying. I'm an economic development analyst at Meta, and I'll just kind of go through my history, and then I'll talk about other random stuff. But yeah, so I actually originally got my undergrad at Berkeley for microbial biology. Sounds weird, but I ended up in accounting. But I worked I honestly wasn't a good student, and I just like worked in like a weird random job, and life sucked, and I was like, hey, what can I do? Like, how do I get out of this? So that's why I went to SDSU for my master's in accounting, and I wanted to do audit. You know, my sister was an auditor, and I was like, that's what I want to do with my life, or that's what I want to try and do at least. And that's where I met Brett, as he mentioned at the beginning, and I was in a club called Beta Alpha Psi. No idea what it was. I wasn't very plugged in, and we just kind of like went to some events, got along really well, and so that's how I stayed in touch with Brett. Um, but yeah, some good times. So I was at SDSU, and at the time, I was in a long distance. So my life is like defined by not very like clear career objectives.
Yeah.
But my partner at the time, she was long distance in North Carolina, and I was like trying to get a job, and I wasn't really sure where. We knew we wanted to end up in California, so San Diego State, it's generally easier to recruit like in your area. So I was fielding uh, like interviews and things like that in the area, but I wanted to end up in LA, so it was like right between San Francisco and San Diego. So I was hoping for a job offer there, and where I ended up was in tax, but every position I applied for was audit, because that's honestly where I did the best, got the best scores. That's what I understood best. But I ended up going to a Deloitte tax event because I think I signed up for the wrong event, and like a quarter of the way through the event, I was like, "Where are all the audit people? This is really strange." But that's how I met a lot of those people there, and I there's a classmate there that was a pretty good friend of mine, and he kind of introduced me to a bunch of people there, and I got in touch with the recruiter, and they're like, "Hey, your science background plus like your interest in tax." I was like, "Oh, I love tax." So I was just trying to get a job, and yeah, they put me in touch with the recruiter, and they had a job in LA for their R&D tax credit department. By department, I mean like practice. It's like one partner up there, and yeah, so I took that job offer, moved up to LA. R&D tax credit is just like it's like a tax credit for companies that do R&D. They spend money on it. Government wants to incentivize that, and so there's like calculation component and there's a documentation component. So this job basically did just that for many different clients and companies in all sorts of industries. But being in California, you ended up working for a lot of software companies. So I did that for a few years, and then partway through, like we had an opportunity to join the state credits and incentives team. So the R&D tax credit is a type of credits and incentive, and then the C&I credits and incentives is like everything else, because everything else is just a lot smaller, but they grouped that into like one other practice at Deloitte. So I did there for a couple of years. And at that time, I'll just give you the hard truth. There's like a big layoff, like I think right before I made manager. And I was like just really hurt by that. And one of my old senior managers went over to Grant Thornton and be like a partner. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna follow him over there. So I went back to doing R&D tax credits. I mean, we're pretty close, like he lives in my area. Let's see. Yeah, so that's majority in public accounting at least. Yeah, so I worked at Grant Thornton for a couple of years. It's like a mid-market public accounting firm. So like back at Deloitte, you had clients of all sorts of sizes, like small, medium, and the ultra large ones. At Grant Thornton's a lot of small to medium. So it was more projects, and there was like less like infrastructure or like less team. So it's like you had a lot of projects, a lot of ownership of your projects, which was kind of a interesting interesting time. But I had a good time there, and then some of my old teammates ended up working at Meta, and we kind of were talking, and I was like, hey, I want to get out of public, like how do I do this? And yeah, they were hiring, and I interviewed. It was a long interview process. I actually got turned down the first time, and I in that year after, like I had a kid, I was like doing a lot better at Grant Thornton. Like I finally like found my own. I finally found some like staff that could help me on stuff. And I was like, all right, my life will be all right here. And then reached back out like a year later, and they're like, hey, are you still interested? We have another opening. So that was how I ended up here. So that's like my life journey. And then let's see, advice. Honestly, everyone had really great advice. I don't know if I have anything constructive to add, but I'll just go through it anyway because you guys are obligated to listen. So
Yeah, I'm trying.
yeah. So I think the first thing, like, or not the first thing, but I think the thing that over my 8 or 9 years in being in the accounting world is like I thought I was going to be like, oh, I'm going to be the best Excel spreadsheet master. Like I'm going to build all these school like skills and everything. But I think over time, what I'm realizing is like, I think one of the most important skills that anyone has is the ability to communicate well. And that comes in all different shapes and forms. It's like your attitude towards it. It's like your proactiveness about it. It's like your ability to construct words or put your idea down on paper or say it out loud so someone else can understand. It doesn't have to sound great, but as long as they understand you, that's all you need. There's some flowery to it that some people prefer, but at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is I need person B to understand what I'm trying to say. And as long as you accomplish that, that's primary goal. But I've worked with a lot of people. I've worked in a lot of different service lines, and that's the one like thread that I think has been the most consistent is the people that have been the most successful were the best communicators. And it's not a skill that you just have inherently. It's something you have to work for really hard. So like when you first start out, take those opportunities to write the reports, write the emails. You can draft the client emails, like volunteer for all of that, and people will review it. You can see like what changes they made. You can ask why did they make that change. I can't tell you how many times where in my email I would write like from so and so, and they would change it to regards, and I'll be like, why does that matter? And I realize now it doesn't matter, but sometimes the little changes like that do matter. And so like to pick up and learn and just kind of like learn different styles and really understand like what is like the pro and con of like communicating in a certain way. And sometimes you're just trying to like tell someone a fact, and then sometimes you're trying to convince someone to like agree with you, and then so it's like persuasive writing. So there's all sorts of different types of communication that you will need to do in your career. And so that one I want to highlight the most because I feel like that's the most. I mean, apparently in this call everyone says it's really important, but I always feel like it's very underrated. So that's one aspect. And the other one I had is just like going into like your career with like kind of a chip on your shoulder to work as hard as you can. I know that sounds like almost like a luxury or maybe like lazy. Not everyone has the ability to work till like 7 p.m. or 10 p.m. and it's like they have different life commitments that they have. Like I have a kid now, so like I don't know if I could start public accounting now at this point in my life. But at the time I was single, I didn't really have like a lot of things to do. Or I wasn't single, but I didn't have a lot of competing interests from a time. But and the reason for that is like it's kind of like what at least in public accounting, this is just from that perspective where you have like a lot of projects, it's hard work, you're there late hours, and it's so refreshing when someone's like, hey, give me that thing that's like no one wants to do, like let me work on that. I'm like, oh, love this person. It's stuff like that where you're putting that extra effort, the courage to take on some of those assignments. And there's a benefit too, like you do those things, you also learn the fastest because you're presented with the hardest challenging assignments that are there. So I guess where I'm going with this is communication, working hard, a lot of things. I'm kind of gearing towards like relationships, and these are all ways that you build relationships. So communicating well, working hard with your team, but it's not just that you know a person, it's that they trust you. So it's like making relationships that have value or that are more significant than just like a fleeting, oh, yeah, I've met this person like one time. But when they trust you, that it's like it unlocks so many doors because they know who you are, what you're capable of, how you think, that you're logical or that you'll follow a process to get to an answer, and they can trust you in the moment. And so that's one way that your work life will get easier is everything you do won't get questioned. Uh, like you can control your timeline, you can even control the projects that you're on. So I think that is kind of like the lesson I wanted to get to is just all these things really lead to that point to gain control of like your working life. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I had a couple more notes, but that's that's pretty much it.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions for Andy? How's the work-life balance? And
Oh, the work-life balance. Oh man,
look how he's dressed.
oh, it's pretty good now. I'm fully remote right
joking.
now. So this job is pretty chill. I don't work any weekends. I generally sign off at like 5 o'clock, sometimes 4 o'clock. My boss is like, "Hey, get out of here." Online virtually. When I was at Deloitte, I was probably working like 55 to 60 hours a week year round. I wasn't in a tax busy season group, but I was in a project group, like special projects groups. But so we were like flatter, but just like more than a 40-hour a week every week. Um, and then when I was at Grant Thornton, it wasn't as busy. The projects were just smaller, so it was a little bit easier to manage a workload. But this one, I started like 20 at the end of 22, and we had a very slow 23 or so. I was working from like 50 hours a week to like 25. That felt very jarring. It felt like I was going to get fired because I didn't have enough. Sometimes I felt like I didn't have enough work to do, but it's busy now. We're growing and stuff, but it's busy. So compared to public, it's definitely like I would say I have more autonomy over my time. I don't have like 5 different partners like being like, hey, can you go to like Tennessee tomorrow? And I'm like, no, I can't.
Fine line between awesome and worrisome, right?
Yeah.
Something like right with the 25 hours. That sounds great, but right now. Okay. Any other questions for Andy? Anyone? Okay, I believe it's pickup time soon, right, Andy? Yeah, he has to pick up his kids. So thank you for coming. And I have one more speaker. He could not make this actual time because he was in the process of flying, but we recorded it on Tuesday. We met on virtually and recorded. So I'm gonna actually share my screen and hold on. Get out of this. And I'm gonna just play this video. And this is Jason will be there. He was in my class like I want to say 8-9 years ago in audit, and I'll let him take it away. But he now works for DoorDash.
Governance, risk, and compliance analyst at DoorDash. I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to being here at DoorDash, I was actually at PwC in their what they called at the time the risk assurance, which is really just a fancy name for IT audit. I was in that practice for about 5 years, in which the time I left, climbed my way. I was a senior acting manager at PwC. And just a little bit about how I know Professor Kawada. I was actually a student in his class at San Diego State in his auditing course. I think it was like accounting 431, something like that. Had a lot of nightmares about that class.
You did fine, man. You did fine.
Yeah, so that's when I initially met, and initially when I thought about accounting, I always thought about numbers, just debit and credits, and the basics. I didn't really understand this concept of auditing or what an auditor was. So that class was really fundamental, honestly, for my career because it introduced a new space of accounting from just the financial side to actually like the auditing side of it. So I got my degree in accounting. I had a minor in marketing. I did that actually to help get me eligible for the credits to get my CPA license. I acquired my CPA license in 2018. In fall 2018, I've been active since. On the side, I have a small tax practice, which is complete remote. Myself, every now and then, I might use the support of a contractor. But that's pretty much what I'm doing with my accounting background. So just kind of going through my journey. I graduated from San Diego State in 2017. Again, like I mentioned, was in the accounting degree. I got my internship with PwC actually in 2014. The name of the internship then was a START internship, which was an internship that was really curated for folks with diverse backgrounds that were looking to get into accounting. And at the time, what I thought was just me trying to get a summer job actually was a foundation, the foundational springboard for my career. What was me just trying to apply to a job, again, like I said, just for something quick for the summer, turned into about 8 years of a tenure between college and post-college of working with PwC. What was super cool about it is in the time of the internship, I got an opportunity to learn about all the different lines of services. A lot of folks who ask you, like, why accounting? What do you want to do? It's like, well, I've never done any of this, so I don't really know what I want to do. So that was super cool because I was able to get exposed to tax, financial audit, advisory, IT audit. And obviously, most folks are familiar with financial audit as well as tax. The one that I actually ended up getting into, which IT audit side, was one I didn't know too much about. And I would say the closest course-wise, the closest course that kind of gave you some of the backgrounds, like a management information systems or an accounting information systems course. And that really gave me a different realm of thinking, because at the time, this is before, AI is even a conversation, or a lot of folks are still moving into the cloud. A lot of folks were working with on-premise servers and applications. So at the time, a mentor told me, like, hey, this is where a lot of the world is going. A lot of things are going to be heavily focused on IT. So, entertain audit tax, but a lot of things, a lot of roles, a lot of opportunities will be in this IT audit space. So again, 2014 through 2017, I'm interning, turned into a full-time offer, started in 2018, was there predominantly in the IT audit space. I did a couple of stints in the financial accounting, financial audit world. Didn't really enjoy it, but IT audit is really where my heart was. And again, like I said, the auditing course that I took with Professor Kawada, is a foundational skill set as far as like how to approach whether it's a data or a project. It's just more so like I would say the audit skill set is very versatile. There's not just one space where you can leverage it. You take it across almost all things that you can do when using your accounting degree. So I was, again, like I said, I was there. I was in San Diego office at PwC. Really enjoyed my time. Met a lot of good people. Was keep up with a good amount of them to this day. Was able to build a strong network and a lot of skills. You do have to know a good amount of knowledge while coming in, but there's no expectation for you to know everything. I know it's pretty daunting when you initially get into any company, but especially a big four, because of the prestige that goes with it. But there is a lot of on-the-job upskilling that occurs. That doesn't mean you can slack off and just wait till you get there. Do well in your classes, get your foot in the door, and be able to network and meet people who can help you take you to the next level. But when you're there, the learning does not stop. That's really the beginning of your journey. A lot of folks say the first year you don't know anything, and I'm here to be a testament to it. Like, you are just eyes wide, just learning something every day. But if you remain hungry and remain curious, you're able to get those skill sets and build those relationships and become a trusted partner, actually, with not only internally but externally. If you're not in the tax world and you're more so in there's still also client service, but more of the like client facing roles are really within the audit space. Another thing that I was not as privy to was having the skill set and the know-how to really interface with clients. There's going to be a fine balance of, hey, I'm technical enough to know what I'm speaking to, but also the people skills of communicating and going through, you may call a walkthrough with the client through their processes. And this is more of a soft skill that, some folks don't really, I think, focus as much time on, because half of the job is getting the information from your client. So if you don't have the people skills to actually navigate maybe tougher situations or processes that aren't as clear, or maybe just a tougher client, it makes your job that much harder. So just to kind of sum up my journey at PwC, again, 5 years in the space, made a lot of great connections. I started off in the San Diego office, transferred to the Los Angeles office, which is where I'm from. And it was about that point in my career where I was at the decision of like, okay, next up is for me as manager. Do I want to continue to go down this route and really go deep down the public accounting realm and get the next level to senior manager, directors, and aspire for partner, or do I see myself maybe pivoting and getting into a different space? Like, while I did enjoy the skill set I learned in IT audit, I have to be honest, public accounting is a grind. There's long hours, there's difficult clients, there's a lot of juggling priorities that can take a wear on you. So that's not everyone's experience, but it was the experience I was having. It's a very common experience. So that is something to be mindful of. So I was at a point in my career where I wanted to, again, leverage those skills, but also the grind of it all wasn't really for me anymore. So that's when I started to look outside of PwC, and some common roles based off the background of what I did were internal audit, which essentially you're doing somewhat of the same things you're doing in the IT audit space on the external side, but you actually work for the company. So I would call it more of like a soft audit, where you can't really get in trouble with anyone that's auditing you, but it's to prepare you for the external audit. That was a very common space. Well, one I didn't know about, and one that I actually ended up with, is this security compliance space of the world. So it still leverages the audit background. My specific area is called governance, risk, and compliance. The governance side is more so tone at the top. How is the company governed? Is there proper policies and procedures in place to make sure we are complying with whatever regulatory frameworks that we have to abide by? Risk management. One of the foundations of accounting is, risk and controls. With accounting is risk and controls. So there's still that element of accounting of understanding risk. So the side of it is, how do we manage risk? Once we identify a risk, what do you do with it? So there's a whole workflow then. The compliance side, which is really where I kind of leverage that accounting background, is mostly external audits. So this is not your typical Sarbanes-Oxley audit. These are other audits that really look at your security requirements. So you might hear of a SOC 2, a SOC 1, PCI, which is payment card information, ensuring that the company that is accepting the card data, it has secure practices in place. It's this whole new realm of regulatory requirements that's not SOX, but it shares a lot of the same principles. Again, this was something I knew nothing about at my time at PwC. Didn't know about it while I was in college. So it opened up this whole new realm for me. I had one of my mentors tell me about it. So I saw this opportunity, threw my application in, and I was like, okay, well, it's not too much of a pivot for me. At the time, I was like, maybe I'll go back to school, get my MBA, and, maybe get into a different realm. But once I got this role, it was just like so much, it's just a whole new world to learn. I was glad I was able to leverage my previous experience at PwC, the soft skills of being able to work with clients, because even though I don't work like externally with clients as much, I still have to work cross-functionally with other stakeholders, and you have to still get information from them. You're still working with auditors, so it's almost like that internal audit aspect, but you're still interfacing with another person that's providing a client service. So the GRC world isn't something I think that's as advertised, so it's a quick plug for it. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer any questions. But it's not accounting. I don't look at numbers. I don't look at financial statements anymore. A lot of the things I deal with are more qualitative, but it still has risk and it still has controls, and there's still audits. So that's pretty much what I'm doing now. I've been in this role for about 3 years. Loving it and continuing to look forward and continue to grow in the role. And just some advice that I would give for you all today is, no matter what point you are in your career, whether you're early, mid, or late, stay curious. The world is ever changing, and I think even now it's changing even faster just with the technology that's out there. As I'm sure you all hear about, you hear AI, machine language, and all the things, and a lot of it can go over your head, and it's a fast-moving pace. And someone's saying that you have to be a subject matter expert in it, but don't be closed off to change. When I first started, as I mentioned, a lot of things were on premise. There were servers, people own their own servers in-house, and nowadays all the large companies, everything's in the cloud. It's all outsourced. Most of the functions are outsourced to other folks. And if you don't stay attuned and abreast to that, it's easy to get left behind or kind of pigeonholed in your role. So stay curious. I would also encourage you to build network. So even how I got here today, Professor Kawada shot me a message on LinkedIn. We haven't spoken 6-7 years, and I jumped at the opportunity to do it because he was part of my journey that got me here today. Taught me some of the foundational aspects of auditing, and because didn't have a bad impression of him, it's like, why not? So stay open, don't burn bridges, build bridges, be open to opportunities to speak to people, get involved in organizations. If there's any organizations on campus or outside of campus, one of them I was part of was NABA, National Association of Black Accountants, and I was able to actually meet a lot of folks that helped me with my career today. And I guess the last piece of advice, I have to go for one more, is don't be afraid to just apply to that company or take a shot, right? Like, don't tell yourself no, let them tell you no. And if you can get more information behind the no, take advantage of that. It's funny, like, just a quick story. When I first applied to PwC for that internship, way back when I applied, I was a sophomore in college, or I was a rising sophomore. So the summer right before my sophomore year, I applied to an internship that was really meant for graduating seniors. And the recruiter saw my application. I'm sure she was like, what the heck? Like, who is this person that tried to apply to this role? But they actually reached out and was like, hey, this is like kind of beyond where you are right now. But we actually have a great internship for you that, fits your profile after next year. So, stay in touch and let's continue this relationship. And then, you can apply when the time comes up. So that's exactly what I did. I kept in touch. I did coffee meetups. I never did coffee meetup before then, but I figured it out. And I was just able to stay in touch and keep that relationship going. And like I said, that internship and that opportunity, that just desire of me wanting a summer job, really led into what was the foundation of my career. And, I'm thankful for every moment of it. I'm so glad that I sent the application. So that's it. That's all I have. Thank you all for listening to me. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. My name is Jason Obede. I'm sure Professor Kawada can share my information with you, but happy to field any questions or provide any other advice.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
No worries.
All right.
All right.
So hold on. I can close this. So sorry, I went over a lot of good information from our guest speakers. Final things to close on. I thought in the event we had time, Jason and I discussed this, that he's actually at a airport gate right now or something. I was like, maybe I could shoot you some messages and if there's any questions, but I don't want to keep anybody too long. So in any case, any of our guests, if you can reach out to them or you can reach out to them via me, feel free. Last thing I want to close on is the importance of networking. I think a lot of that was discussed a lot today, but I want to highlight that it's really important at every kind of dynamic, so to say. It doesn't matter what status you are related to another person or group of people, right? So it could be networking can involve those that are senior or supervisory to you. It can involve your peers, or it can involve those you mentor and supervise. So all levels. And of course, to analogize in a Star Wars context, when Obi-Wan fought Darth Vader, he says, when I left you, I was the student. Now I am the master. I feel honestly that way sometimes with a lot of my former students. They know so much probably more about the profession than I do, especially because they're in it right now. So it was awesome to have them here. I thank them all. And I think that's it. So does anybody have, Mahalo is my Hawaii roots. Apologize if that's unfamiliar to y'all. But does anybody have any questions in general? And we can share or I can try my best to answer anything. And like I said, if it's for somebody specific that talked today, please feel free to reach out to them or to me to pass on to them. Okay. If not, I thank everyone for their time and attending, and especially our guest speakers. And I guess that's it.